ABC General Hospital spoilers reveal that what makes this story so gripping is that Britt is not simply trapped in danger. She is trapped in a form of danger designed specifically for her, one that attacks her body, her conscience, and her last remaining hope at the same time. For Britt, the nightmare does not begin with a gun or a shouted threat. It begins with deprivation. It begins with a terrifying knowledge that the medicine keeping her symptoms under control is no longer truly hers. It exists somewhere just beyond reach, close enough to imagine, close enough to long for, but now placed behind the will of a man who knows exactly how desperate she is. That changes everything. A direct enemy can sometimes be fought, tricked, or escaped, but an enemy who controls the thing your body needs in order to remain stable does not merely threaten you. He enters your breathing, your thinking, your timing. He turns every passing hour into a negotiation with fear. Cullum understands that better than anyone, and that is why his pressure on Britt feels so chilling. He is no longer content with suspicion or half-truths. He wants a name. He wants the truth about who shot him on that pier, not because truth matters to him in any moral sense, but because he cannot bear uncertainty when uncertainty makes him look weak. The bullet did more than wound his body. It wounded his pride. A man like Cullum can tolerate pain far more easily than he can tolerate not knowing who dared to strike him down. That ignorance festers inside him like an insult he cannot stop touching. And because he cannot force the past to reveal itself, he turns instead to the person he believes can be cornered, squeezed, and broken into usefulness. Britt becomes the ideal target not because she is guilty, but because she is vulnerable. She stood near the center of the chaos. She is tied to Jason. She has already lied once in the aftermath. And most importantly of all, she is sick in a way Cullum can exploit without ever having to raise his voice. That is what gives the ultimatum its real cruelty. If Cullum merely demanded answers, Britt could still cling to defiance. She could hate him clearly, reject him clearly, and draw whatever strength remained from the clean simplicity of resistance. But this is not a simple threat. It is a poisoned bargain. He is not just demanding that she talk. He is tying her access to medication to the one thing she cannot safely give him. In doing so, he transforms every symptom of her illness into a countdown. The tremors, the fatigue, the disorientation, the fear of losing control at the wrong moment, none of these remain private struggles anymore. Under Cullum's hand, they become leverage. They become part of his interrogation. Each wave of weakness pressing through Britt's body becomes another reminder that silence has a cost, and the cost is not abstract. It is neurological, it is physical, it is immediate. It is the possibility of slipping further into decline while the man tormenting her watches with cold patience, convinced that pain will eventually do his work for him. Britt's tragedy is that she is not only fighting for herself. If this were merely about her own survival, the path before her might be brutal, but it would at least be simpler. She could make a calculation. She could weigh dignity against self-preservation and choose whichever loss she believed she could endure. But the shadow hanging over this story is Rocco, and that changes the emotional stakes completely, because the moment Britt begins to understand who really shot Cullum, the entire nature of her suffering shifts. She is no longer just a woman being coerced. She becomes the guardian of a secret that could shatter a young life. From that moment on, every symptom she hides, every lie she tells, every second she buys for herself becomes tied to someone else's future. And for Britt, that is the kind of burden that cuts deeper than fear for her own life. She knows what it means to be marked by damage, by judgment, by the fallout of things that cannot be undone. The idea of letting a child bear the full violence of adult consequences would not feel like justice to her. It would feel like surrender to the ugliest logic in Port Charles, the logic that says innocence is expendable when powerful people need answers. So Britt's silence becomes more complicated, more painful, and more heroic than anyone around her may realize. To Cullum, it will look like evasiveness. To investigators, it may eventually look like obstruction. To anyone standing outside the emotional core of the secret, it may even look irrational. Why not tell the truth if the truth could save her? Why not trade one terrible revelation for the medicine she needs? Why not protect herself for once? But that is precisely where Britt's conflict becomes so devastating. The truth is not neutral in this situation. The truth, once spoken aloud, will not simply solve a puzzle. It will unleash consequences that cannot be contained. It will expose Rocco to fear, guilt, and potential retaliation. It will rearrange Dante's world, Lulu's world, and everyone else's understanding of what really happened on that night. It will confirm that Jason took the blame for a reason. And once Cullum knows the answer, there is no promise that the danger ends. In fact, for Britt, the danger may become even worse, because a man obsessed with revenge does not grow gentler when he gets what he wants. He grows more precise. That is why her illness matters so much in storytelling terms. Huntington's is not just a plot obstacle here. It becomes a cruel mirror for the emotional siege Britt is enduring. Her body is already betraying her in slow motion, already reminding her that control is fragile and time is merciless. Cullum's ultimatum accelerates that inner terror by placing the illusion of control in his own hands. He can pretend he is offering her a choice, but it is not really a choice when one path leads toward bodily collapse and the other leads toward moral devastation. Britt is forced to live in the narrow space between those two forms of destruction. She cannot fully protect herself without endangering Rocco. She cannot fully protect Rocco without endangering herself. That is the kind of conflict GH handles best when it wants to turn suspense into emotional suffocation. Not a heroine versus a villain in a straightforward contest, but a heroine trapped between two duties that both demand sacrifice. And the more Britt's condition worsens, the more terrifying Cullum becomes. A healthy person can sometimes hide fear behind composure. A sick person being denied treatment cannot hide the toll forever. Cullum will see it in the way Britt's stamina gives out too quickly, in the way her focus splinters, in the way her body starts betraying signals she cannot fully mask. He will notice because predators always notice the moment performance stops and desperation starts. He will understand that time is now his ally. He does not need to break Britt in one dramatic confrontation. He only needs to let her worsen. He only needs to stand between her and relief long enough for panic to bloom. That is what makes him so dangerous in this storyline. He is not simply violent. He is patient in a way that turns suffering into strategy. He can wait for the disease to do part of the work. He can let Britt's fear of decline soften her resistance. He can hold the medication out like a promise and then keep moving it just beyond reach, forcing her to chase hope until hope itself becomes a form of humiliation. Yet Britt is not a weak woman, and this is where the emotional power of the story deepens. Her strength has never come from invulnerability. It has come from the fact that she keeps moving even when damaged, keeps making choices even when every choice costs her something. That kind of strength is uglier and more moving than simple bravery. It is not glamorous. It is exhausted. It is frightened. It shakes. It doubts itself, but it endures. If Britt realizes Rocco is the shooter, her instinct will not be to save herself by exposing him. Her instinct will be to absorb more pressure, to buy more time, to keep the truth contained until she can find another way through. That instinct may not be wise. It may not even be sustainable. But emotionally, it is completely right for her, because Britt has always been the kind of character who carries guilt and tenderness in the same hand. She can be sharp, defensive, and difficult, yet when it matters most, she often reveals a fierce protective streak that makes her suffering feel all the more tragic. The situation also becomes more haunting because Jason is absent in the worst possible way. He is not by Britt's side. He cannot buffer Cullum's pressure, cannot help manage the cover-up, cannot stand between Britt and the full force of the ultimatum. His absence is not empty space, it is active weight. Every decision Britt now makes must be made without the one person who might fully understand why she lied, why she kept going, why she would never casually hand over a child to a man like Cullum. That isolation sharpens the emotional tone of the storyline. Britt is not just making a sacrifice. She is making it alone, while sick, under pressure, and with no guarantee that her loyalty will ever lead to anything except deeper suffering. It is one thing to risk yourself when rescue feels possible. It is another to keep risking yourself when rescue has become only memory and instinct. If the story keeps moving in the direction these clues suggest, Britt's crisis will not remain private for long. The deterioration in her health will eventually become impossible to fully conceal. Someone will notice the cracks. Someone will see that she is not simply stressed, but physically failing. And when that happens, the emotional stakes will multiply again, because Britt will no longer have the option of bearing this in silence without consequences to the people who care about her. Her secret will start to leak into the larger canvas of Port Charles. Lucas may sense what is wrong. Dante may begin piecing together why Britt looks so haunted whenever the shooting comes up. Even those who do not know the full truth may feel that something about her is unraveling. That is when pressure turns into tragedy, when private torment starts becoming visible, but the person suffering still cannot speak freely because the truth they carry is too dangerous to release. The most compelling version of this story is not that Britt will simply collapse and be rescued at the last second. It is that she will continue fighting past the point where fighting is reasonable, because that is who she is, and because the secret at the center of this ordeal has become inseparable from her own conscience. Every day Cullum denies her medicine, he believes he is narrowing her choices. In reality, he is revealing the depth of her resolve. He is showing that even in a compromised state, even while frightened of what Huntington's may do to her next, Britt would rather stand in agony than become the instrument of his vengeance. That makes her silence more than stubbornness. It makes it a moral stand, however messy and dangerous that stand may be. Still, moral stands in Port Charles rarely go unpunished. The more Britt refuses to give Cullum what he wants, the more likely it becomes that he will escalate. He may tighten the deadline. He may force more confrontations. He may let her see the medication without allowing her to touch it, making his control feel almost intimate in its cruelty. He may convince himself that he is not torturing her, merely motivating her, which is the kind of lie ruthless men tell themselves when they want to keep believing they are practical instead of monstrous. And Britt, already weakened, may start to fear not just death or decline, but her own eventual breaking point. That may be the most horrifying thought of all for her, not that she will die, but that she might one day say too much under the combined pressure of illness, fear, and exhaustion. The possibility of betrayal, even accidental betrayal, may terrify her more than the symptoms themselves. That is why this storyline feels so dark and so emotionally rich. It forces Britt into a conflict where the body and the soul are under siege at the same time. Cullum is hunting for a shooter, but what he is really doing is stripping away Britt's margin for survival. He is demanding truth while making truth morally impossible. He is withholding medicine while pretending negotiation remains fair. He is turning a sick woman into the battlefield for his own obsession. And Britt, in response, is becoming something heartbreakingly resilient, a woman in visible decline who still tries to shield someone more vulnerable than herself. The irony is brutal. The sicker she gets, the more heroic her silence becomes, and the more dangerous that heroism is to her own survival. In the end, the power of this plot lies in the image at its center. Britt standing on unsteady ground, body failing, fear rising, medication withheld, and yet still refusing to hand Cullum the one thing he wants most. Around her, the world grows harsher. Time grows shorter. The secret of the shooting sharpens into a blade hovering over everyone connected to it. If she discovers the truth about Rocco, that blade will hang even closer to her heart, because then every symptom she endures will be tied to a conscious decision to protect him. She will not simply be living through illness. She will be choosing moment after moment to let that illness press harder against her rather than expose a child to a man hungry for revenge. That is not peace. That is not safety. That is not even hope in any clean sense. It is endurance at its most painful and most human. And that is exactly why Britt's ordeal now feels like one of the most haunting threads on General Hospital, because the danger is no longer only what Cullum might do to her, but what her love, guilt, loyalty, and fear will force her to keep surviving in silence before someone finally sees how close to the edge she has come.